Hello and welcome to London Guided Walks podcast. In the coming episodes, we will be sharing our love and passion for London, its people, places and history in an espresso shot with a splash of personality. For those of you who don't know me, I am Hazel Baker, founder of LondonGuidedWalks.co.uk, providing guided walks, private tours and treasure hunts to Londoners and visitors alike, and now bringing you a jam-packed podcast during the time of the coronavirus. Joining me today is one of our long-standing guides, Rob Smith. So, Rob, spy stories with a London connection. Tell me, how did the security services get started?
Well, there have always been spies. I mean, if you think back to Tudor times, there are spies in the court of King James in Spain who know that the Spanish Armada is on its way. So there have been spies for a long time, but the modern security services are actually really the result of a novelist called William Le Quay. William Le Quay was writing in the 1890s and early 1900s. These rather fantastic books which envisage Britain being invaded, first by the French, and then by the Germans as the politics change. They were very convincing stories. They featured the Battle of Dorking, where the sleepy town of Dorking is invaded by the Germans, and nothing more horrific than thinking of your own particular hometown being invaded. And just to add up the fear and paranoia, the Daily Mail started serializing these books, and they had their newspaper sellers dressed up as German soldiers to give you an idea of what it would be like when the Germans invaded. So before long, people start worrying about German spies all over the place. You get stories in Times. There's a case of a story where a man says, well, there's a German man in my street. I know he's got a full head of hair, but he still chooses to wear a wig. Surely that's the sign of a spy. And this kind of paranoia goes on so much, people seeing spies everywhere, that in the House of Parliament, questions are asked. What is going to be done about these 5,000 German spies which are in Britain at the moment? And another MP stands up and says, 5,000 spies? There are 300,000 German soldiers already in Britain, disguised as waiters and ready to turn into an armed force at a moment's notice. Well, the Prime Minister at the time, Herbert Asquith, is forced to try and do something about this. So he sets up a committee called the Committee for Imperial Defence. And the idea is these will try and root out these spies and catch them. So they have two men, a naval officer called Mansfield Cumming and an army officer called Herbert Kell. Between them, they work out there are far too many spies to deal with. So they're going to split the work. So Kell will deal with spies already in the UK, and Cummings will deal with spying outside the UK. So they just split up into two organisations. The one dealing with spying inside the UK is MI5, and the one outside the UK, MI6. So they become established just before World War One.
And what was their role in World War One?
Well, in World War One, there's intense fear of the Germans invading, using subterfuge to invade, but also to gather intelligence outside. So MI6 were based in a building called Whitehall Place, which you can visit today. It's now the Royal Horse Guards Hotel, and there Mansfield Cumming has his office, and he coordinates a spy network across Belgium called La Dame Blanche. Now, La Dame Blanche were made up of Belgian volunteers who, a lot of them were women, who worked as midwives. And there was a curfew in place, so the Germans wouldn't allow people to go out at night. But midwives, they had to go when a baby was being born. So they would go off on their bicycles, but their bicycle route would often take them via the local station. And they would make a note of any German troop trains that were leaving for the trenches, and then pass on their information via carrier pigeon back to MI6 operators on the other side of the lines. This was very bad news for pigeons, because when the Germans get wind of this, they give all their troops a bounty for each pigeon shot down. Now, Mansfield Cumming is in charge of the operation in what is now the Royal Horse Guards Hotel, and you can see a blue plaque outside his house, his building there. Because his surname was Cumming, he always signed his letters with a single letter C. And to this day, the head of MI6 is still known as C. And he would always use green ink to sign any documents. And C to this day always used green ink to sign any documents. So some of the traditions have stuck around from World War One.
So forgive me, but in James Bond, you have the characters with M and Q. Is there any relation to that then?
That's definitely what inspired it. There isn't, strictly speaking, a Q department, but MI6 have a department where they have gadgets and tricks. I love to say they make cars which can go underwater and turn into submarines, like in the James Bond films. Not quite as adventurous as this, but they did have a underground car park where they converted vehicles for their use during the 1920s and 1930s. And you can see that at the end of St Anne's Gate in London. There's a little slope down there to where was the MI6 car park. And they would put tracking devices and they would put special armour and weapons into cars and vehicles. The MI6, I'm told, still do have a base up near Milton Keynes where they create gadgets for the security services to this day. So the Q department does exist in a way. Well, especially in the early days, things were a little bit amateurish. Um, in the 1920s and 1930s, often the work that was going on was very covert by the nature of spying. But the British did not want to get agents themselves involved in operations which were not strictly necessary. So MI6 tended to recruit people like businessmen who were able to move around countries overseas unnoticed, and they would do things like carry bags and cases to agents that were hidden away. So it meant that you got a lot of people who were not formally members of the security services, but who would work for them. And they would be told to come along to the Sun Ermine Hotel. Sun Ermine Hotel, still in London, a very lovely hotel. But it was an all informal base for MI6 recruitment during the 1930s. So if MI6 had a job for you, you'd be told to come along to the Caxton Bar in the St Ermine Hotel, and you'd be given your instructions there. Now, this happened in 1938 to a man called Rickman. So he reported to Section D of MI6. Now, Section D the D stood for destruction, and their job was to carry out industrial sabotage all over Europe. Now, the war hadn't started yet, but the plan was that if they could sabotage the German economy enough before the war started, it might stop the war before it started. So Rickman's given the job of blowing up a pier in Sweden, which is used to export iron ore to Germany. Now, we're not at war with Germany. We're certainly not at war with Sweden. So it would be very dangerous sending an official British operative to do the job. So Rickman's recruited to do this. The only problem is Rickman has no idea about being a spy at all. He's terribly excited about it, though. And he has written a book about iron ore, and that's his best qualification. So he's given a case full of plastic explosives that he will have to pick up from the British Embassy in Sweden, and take those and put them near the pier. But Rickman's so excited about this, he asks if he can have a gun as well. Now, MI6 say absolutely no need for you to carry a gun. Just give the suitcase and you'll be put there. He eventually badgers them to allow them to carry a gun. And I'm not sure how he managed to do this. He ends up firing the gun through the roof of his hotel room, which attracted the attention of the police, and the whole mission had to be abandoned. So those early days, it was a little bit amateurish. The other problem you have is that recruitment of spies was rather informal as well. If you were in the 1930s interested in joining the security services, well, they had to do some background security checks. I mean, first of all, they would check to see that you'd gone to a good school. Then, had you gone to Oxford or Cambridge University. Oh, well, that sounds good. You seem like a pretty good sort. Are you a member of a gentleman's club? Yes. Oh, well, in that case, we can trust you. Come along to St Ermine's Hotel, and you can join up with the security services. This, rather unfortunately, is what happens to one of the most infamous spies, Kim Philby. So, Philby, in the 1930s, he's out in Vienna. He's married to a woman out there who's helping smuggle communists out of Nazi Germany and helping them escape through Vienna. His wife says to Philby that if you really hate the Nazis, what you should do is work like I do for the Russians. After all, a lot of the British aristocracy, they quite like the Nazis. Working for the Russians is much more useful. So he agrees to do this, and he meets with a Russian handler who tells him, "Okay, what we want you to do is go back to Britain, go to Cambridge University, and there make lots of friends, friends who will be useful and act as spies later on. We don't want them to be spies now. We would like them to finish their degree and then join the civil service or join the army, become journalists, become politicians. And then after 10, maybe 15 or even 20 years later on, once they work themselves up into a higher position, that's when we'll get them to spy for you." For Philby, they've got a special task. They want him to join the British security services. And so that's what he does. He goes along to make some contact with them, and they agree to meet him in the St Ermine's Hotel. After all, the background is impeccable. He's been to Cambridge, he's a member of a gentleman's club, ideal material. So goes to the St Ermine's Hotel bar and joins up there. The Russians are just can't believe that it's so easy to get into MI6. They're always suspicious of Philby ever since. Now, one of Philby's first jobs for MI6 is being sent to the Spanish Civil War. That was just exactly what the Russians wanted them to do as well. They needed to know what kind of weapons that the Germans were giving to the Spanish. And Philby is given the task of finding this out by both MI6 and the Russians as well. Well, while he's in Spain, he's almost killed, which just proves to the British what a good chap this Philby is. Prepared to die for king and country out there. He must be a good sort. And he's eventually promoted at the start of World War II to be head of all the MI6 agents in Spain and Portugal. Well, the Russians, again, are very suspicious of Philby, and they have another task for him. So they say, what we want is the name of all the British agents in Moscow. Well, Philby says this is going to be very tricky. I'm in charge of agents in Spain and Portugal. And the Russians say to him, if you want to work for us, you'll get that information. Well, Philby's noticed how his handler from the Russians always keeps changing, and the original handlers disappear, and he doesn't want to be the person who disappears next. So he tries to get the information by bribing his way into the MI6 personnel records using drink, befriending the captain who was in charge of the records and taking to the pub. And eventually the captain says, well, you seem a good chap, Philby. As long as you get all these records back again by Monday, I'll be happy to let you have them. Philby looks in the records, and to his horror, he finds out the British don't have any agents in Moscow, too busy at this time spying on the Germans. Why would they have any agents in Moscow? So he reveals this information to the Russians, and they're not happy about this. After all, there's one thing worse than being spied on. It's not being spied on when you think that you're really important. So they become even more suspicious of Philby as time goes on. And for the next 15 years, Philby's told that he's going to have to come up with more information out of MI6. And he gets into a routine each day. You finish work at the MI6 office at 54 Broadway, which is a building that's still there today. He'll come out the door there, and then he catches a train from St James's Park station, travels 3 stops along on the district line, gets off again, gets back onto the district line, goes back the other way, and then goes into St James's Park and there sits on a bench where he'll meet his KGB handler, gives a bag of files to the KGB handler, who then takes them away, copies him, meets Philby the next morning, and takes them back into the office. Now, this is not trivial information. Philby giving away the names of all the British and American agents in Eastern Europe who are working against the Germans. And when the Russians overrun those countries, all those people are rounded up. Some of them are shot. Some even have their families shot. So Philby has a lot of blood on his hands.
I mean, being an agent must be really stressful, but being a double agent must just play havoc with your nerves, right?
Yeah, stress taken away by alcohol a lot of the time. It's Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people involved in the Philby story seem to be alcoholics. You'd think that alcohol and high security wasn't a good mix, and that's certainly not the case for the two of the agents that Philby had recruited at Cambridge during the 1950s, Burgess and Maclean. Maclean is a very loud-mouthed drunk and takes an awful lot of risks. He even invites members of the Russian security into the St Ermine's Hotel bar to meet them there, right underneath the noses of MI6. It was incredibly brazen, and he gets drunk at parties and insults people and is giving information away left, right, and centre. And this is how the Burgess and Maclean, the net start to close around them, and eventually the security services work out that they must be people giving information away. So just as before they're about to be arrested, they disappear and escape to Switzerland, and from there make their way to Moscow. Now, someone has tipped them off, someone who becomes known as the third man. And there are a lot of people very suspicious that Philby is the third man. I mean, at that time, Maclean was living in the same house as Philby, so who would have given him the information that MI6 were after him? So Philby is under a lot of suspicion, but unfortunately, in those days, the way the security services were run, it was such an old boy network, and there was also so much animosity between MI5 and MI6. When MI5 are asked to investigate him, MI6 actually close ranks around Philby to say it's absolutely disgraceful that one of our chaps is being discussed in this way, and how could a proper gent like Kim Philby be spying for the Russians? So he's allowed to escape. Eventually, there are questions even raised in the House of Commons suggesting that Philby might be a spy, but MI6 do nothing about it. And he then goes into semi-retirement in Beirut. Well, another 10 years pass into the 1960s. More evidence comes to light that Philby was a traitor, and eventually MI5 say you must arrest your man, to the head of MI6. But MI6, instead of arresting him, go over to Beirut, have a quiet word with him, ask him if he's been spying for the Russians. Philby says, well, I was back in the 1930s, but I don't do it now. And they come back again and say, well, Philby's promised not to do it again, and hope the matters drop. Well, MI5 are furious and say, that's idiotic. He'll escape. And sure enough, Philby then goes to Moscow, where he is not fated as the hero he is hoping to be by the Russians, because they're still very suspicious about how easy it has been for Philby to do his stuff. So he's given a very dingy department in Moscow, and there spends the rest of his life as a very sad drunk on the streets of Moscow.
That's all from us for now. Don't forget to visit londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast for more detailed show notes, including photos, blog posts, and recommended reading.